Hello and thank you for joining us in Newsweek, where we highlight some of the biggest stories that made the headlines in the week. I am Jacinta Agochukwu. This week, Senior Advocate of Nigeria and spokesperson for the All Progressive Congress presidential campaign, Council Festus, demands the arrest and prosecution of People's Democratic Party presidential candidate Atiku Abubakar. Also this week, supporters sustained injuries in explosions at an APC rally in Rivers State. Later on the show, we will look at the Nigerian's new Naira notes as central bank governor insists on January 31st deadline. All the details in a moment. Stay with us. Well, we'll begin with politics sprinkled with legal matters, as Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Festus Keyamo, has filed a right of summons at the Federal High Court in Abuja against the presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party, Atiku Abubakar, over corruption allegations. Mr. Keyamo, who is also the spokesperson for the All Progressive Congress Presidential Campaign Council, is asking the court to compel the Code of Conduct Bureau, the ICPC, and the EFCC to investigate, invite, and/or arrest Atiku Abubakar over corruption allegations relating to a certain bank belonging to a company named Marine Float and other accounts of two undisclosed companies. In a statement of claim, Mr. Keyamo alleged that whistleblower Michael Achumugu was privy to this information and has gone public with the claims. Some of its contents includes how said accounts were allegedly used as special purpose vehicles to secretly divert and misappropriate public funds between 1999 and 2007, when Mr. Abubakar served as Vice President of Nigeria. Joining me now in the studio, I have a member of All Progressive Congress, APC, Joe Ibokwe.
Thank you for having me.
All right, thank you for coming on the show. Let's move on. How serious do you think this allegation put forward by APC is?
It's a serious matter because this is not the first time we're hearing this kind of thing against the former Vice President Atiku Abubakar. If you have read Obasanjo's book, My Watch, I can read some of the things he said there about his, when your principals says this kind of thing, then you know nobody's lying there. He said, I want to quote it, he said, "What I did not know, which came out glaringly later, was his parental background, which was somewhat shadowy. His propensity to corruption, his tendency to disloyalty, his inability to say and stick to the truth all the time, a propensity for poor judgment, his belief and reliance on marabouts, his lack of transparency, his trust in money to buy his way out on all issues, and his readiness to sacrifice morality, integrity, propriety, truth, national interest for self and selfish interest." That's Obasanjo. What he wrote about his vice president, his vice. So you can imagine, when your principal says this kind of thing about you, there's nothing more to add. So these things are just part of what happened. Don't forget that Atiku became the vice president in 1999 with Obasanjo, and by 2004, in fact, before 2003, he has seized the entire the government, He was to run for the president. In fact, somebody told me that then, between 1999 and 2003, all roads were leading to Atiku's house. Nobody remembered that Obasanjo, was existing. Because of this SDV we are talking about here, because of the money, because of the power he has. In fact, the president, Obasanjo, had to practically lie down for him, beg him, and said, once I finish in 2007, I will hand over to you. The moment Obasanjo seized power, he crushed and decimated his ambition.
Right.
That's where we are today.
Mr. Bukwere, some will say these accusations and call-outs are nothing but politics playing out. Do you agree?
Politics, it's not politics. When you are principal, put this kind of thing in a book. How can you expunge this? He knew him in and out, and till date he knows him. So it's a practice, you see. Don't forget it has been in the customs. When you deal with a custom officer, you can understand what we're talking about. So it's well known. By 2003, he has used the structures, money, this kind of money we're talking about here, to seize the entire political landscape. Obasanjo practically begged him. And the moment Obasanjo got that second time, he displayed military tactics and got him out of, rendered him nugatory throughout the remaining, before he got to 2007. So all these things played out. You see, this SDV we are talking about is a vehicle. It's a kind of special purpose vehicle that people use for business. But it can be abused. It can be used for good. Three people can decide to set up a business and use SDV. But in case of, if you watch the video, live video of Atiku and this Mike Achimogu, you will know that it's, you know what transpired. It's not, things don't just happen like that. It is what he's known for. If you know the man Atiku, that's what he's known for.
All right, if you're saying these allegations are very serious, what implication do you think this will have on Atiku's chances over this election?
You see, we're talking about the presidency of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And when this kind of matter is dropped on the table, you have to look at it dispassionately, not minding whose ox is God. Because I always say it, if you elect somebody as the president of Nigeria, he will stay 4 years. You see, you're entitled to 2 times. And if you are not careful, a mediocre, he will use 4 years. And if you are not careful, he will take 8 years. Which means people will suffer for 8 years. So you need to be extremely very careful when you are dealing with such people with such character. And we have to be extremely very careful. 4 years, 8 years are very important in the life of a nation like Nigeria. Very important. Because if he misused, everybody will suffer. So it behooves on all of us to study somebody. If somebody is coming out for this exalted office, you need to know his background, know where he's coming. That's why some of these things are coming out. If you have anything, bring it out. Bring it out. In the head of the candidates, all of them, bring it out. Let's see. Because we cannot toy with 4 years. We cannot also toy with 8 years. Because he has the chance to get 2 terms. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much for your contributions, Mr. Ibukwe. But right now, we will go on a short break, and Newsweek continues in a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. It's Tune Newsweek, where we highlight some of the biggest stories that made the headlines in the week. Now let's take you to River State, where some supporters of the All Progressive Congress in River State sustained injuries after an alleged improvised substance exploded at the popular Ibuku field. The venue of the rally in Port Harcourt on Thursday. The injured victims, mostly women, were immediately evacuated from the scene of the incident. The youths were said to have prevented the party from holding the rally at a field located at popular Ma1 area of Port Harcourt. The 3 injured persons narrated the incident to newsmen and were taken to a nearby hospital for medical attention. The River State Police Command, through the spokesperson of the command, SP Grace Arrange Coco, said the incident was not politically motivated, rather the internal crisis within the community over which faction controlled the community town hall reared its ugly head. Well, I still have Joe Iboko in the studio, while Executive Director, Center for Public Accountability, Olufemi Lawson, joins me now via Zoom. Good evening, Mr. Olufemi.
Good evening, Jacinta.
All right, it's good to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Okay, so you know the police came out to dismiss this whole thing that is political motivated. But what can you make of this rancor that just came out of that rally?
Well, thank you for having me once again. Irrespective of what must have been the cause or who might have been responsible for that explosion and that political campaign, I think it is important that we cannot separate such from political violence that we are likely to experience in some places ahead of this election. And why are people targeting political campaigns? Why are they targeting, institutions around the election? Over the past few weeks, it has been attacks on the facility of INEC. It has been attacked on the offices of political parties. Now, it has gotten to the stage of attacks on political campaigns. But why are we having a reoccurrence of these incidences of violence? It looks so much like we are not doing enough to punish perpetrators of violence. And unfortunately, the posture of some of those in government, particularly at the state level, is not also helping. It seems to be encouraging some of these tendencies of violence, when rather than searching for culprits and bringing them to book, you begin to define factors responsible. People were the ones in charge of the community. I would, for God's sake, even a government, justify the fact that there are rival gangs operating in a community where normally you are supposed to be in charge of the safety and security of citizens and their properties. It is a dangerous, dimension to what may likely happen in future campaigns ahead of the election, not only in Rivers State, but in some other states of the Federation. We need to start criminalizing violence during elections, irrespective of who the sponsors are or who the victims are, until we make it very criminal. For people to perpetrate violence during elections, we may begin to look at a situation where we may have even worse scenarios like we witnessed in Rivers State just a few days ago.
Olufemi, what do you also make of this pattern, political parties and their supporters, the way they are handling this whole thing? What do you make of the whole pattern in this campaign?
Look, well, so far, the campaigns, if you look at the manner in which the presidential candidates have carried their campaigns, you want to agree with me that it has been quite impressive, matured, and of course, we've had few or no incidences of this kind of fracas, even among, opposing supporters of these political parties. But when we talk about election violence, and that is why, as commendable as the initiative of the National Peace Committee is, the truth is that, you cannot but look at the role that the state actors at the state levels are playing in, of course, in the promotion of violence, in this election. you must look at a situation whereby we must look beyond, ensuring that the presidential candidates, are made to sign peace accords and made to commit themselves to peaceful elections, to also looking at the role of state governors, another category of politicians, in ensuring that there is no violence during this election, in ensuring that there is peace during this election. If we don't do that, you understand, we may have a situation whereby there will be no.
What is this?
All right, Mr. Lufemi Lawson, thank you very much for your contribution on the topic. Let me come to you now, Mr. Ibokwe. How much is required our security personnel to ensure that this coming election is not being tampered with based on, trying to have this kind of attack come up?
For presidential elections, President will always call the stakeholders, and he will bring in some of the former head of states to speak to them. I think the one was held yesterday, presidential election proper. We need to maintain peace, go and campaign, issue violence, do the needful so that people don't lose their lives. But I don't know whether it's replicated in the states. Because this kind of thing happened in Rivers 4 years ago. An APC campaign rally like this, and people died. In fact, they didn't even allow them to campaign. The ruling party didn't even allow them to campaign, and they work out their houses. And it's repeated. And Rivers has always been a flash point, a place that you need to watch. Violence is part of their politics there. That's number one. Number two is that in Lagos here, we use surveillance vehicle. I remember in 2007, we went to campaign in the Bejuleki corridor. We have surveillance vehicles that take, store what is going on there. So we were attacked in the Bejuleki, and I think somebody was killed. Other 2 persons were killed. In the evening, we all gathered in Achiwaju's office and opened the record of what happened, and we were able to pick the perpetrators. So the technology is there. All we need to do is to apply it and fish out. While we were doing that, we didn't even know it was such a mechanism was in place. But we gathered in Achiwaju's office in 2007 and opened the video, and we were able to pick them because we did that. So I want the states to, adopt it. Federal government always does. They had a meeting yesterday, appealing to the aspirants to manage their supporters so that we don't run into a crisis. So we need to repeat the same thing too.
All right, Mr. Ibokwe, thank you for your contribution. But let's go to our final story for tonight. The embattled governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, Godwin Emefiele, met with President Muhammadu Buhari on Thursday in Abuja, where he is believed to have updated the president on the activities of the bank. The 25 minutes meeting with the president put paid to speculations concerning Emefiele's freedom, and the APC bank's chief affirmed the January 31st deadline for the withdrawal of old notes. The CBN appealed to the public to go and deposit their old notes, adding that the disbursement of the new Naira notes has been restricted to ATMs in order to ensure access to all banks' customers. All right, joining me now via Zoom, I have the CEO of Dairy Hills Limited, Kelvin Emmanuel. Thank you for joining us, Emmanuel.
Jacinta, good evening. Hi, how are you today?
I'm all right. So we just have limited time, Mr. Emmanuel, but let me have your view. CBN is still insisting on no going back on January 31st deadline for phasing out the old Naira notes. Let's share your thought on this.
Yeah, Jacinta, there are about 2.7 trillion banknotes in circulation. 90% of it are the old notes. You have about 8 to 9 days to the deadline. In December, the banks had to work double shift, even on Saturdays. And you have a situation where the cutoff for introduction of the new notes into the banking system has not been achieved. And when you want to look at international benchmarks in the UK, for example, they give like 24 months. For example, the transition from late Queen Elizabeth to King Charles started early last year, and they have until middle of 2024 to phase out old notes. It's baffling that in Nigeria, you want to do this within a 90-day window, also considering the fact that the infrastructure for ensuring that there's a smooth transition is not available. So it begs belief, to be honest, how the CBN intends to achieve making the old notes illegal tender by the 1st of February 2023. It beggars belief, to be honest.
All right, Mr. Kelvin. I, for one, just recently got my 1,000 Naira new note. What problem can you possibly think that this can cause, knowing that not everyone has access to this new note, especially the market women and those in rural areas?
Well, this is the issue. Like, out of 209 million people, there are 63 million BVNs and about 133 million bank accounts, which means that there's about 3.8 accounts on a weighted average per account holder in Nigeria. 55% of your population is unbanked. In fact, in states like Borno, there are about 8 local governments that are cut off away from the banking system. 8 local governments. In states like Yobe, for example, Yobe has less than 500 base stations. So you saying that you intend to go into digital and electronic banking and transition into a cashless policy is futile, because it's not something you can compel. It's something you have to incentivize the system on through the open banking framework of the central bank. That has been progressing gradually, but you can't force it. You have to allow the system naturally evolve and allow the people to come into the banking system through financial inclusion. So I don't see how this is feasible. At the end of the day, I think the governor of the CBN and Minister of Finance are due to appear before the Senate, even on the issue of securitization of ways and means this coming week. I'm sure this is an issue the senators is going to bring before the governor of the central bank. At the end of the day, I suspect that they are most likely going to defer the deadline from January 31 forward, maybe until the middle of the year, because this policy, based on all the metrics I've put together, doesn't make any sense at all. And these are not the issues that the central bank should focus on. The most pertinent issue in the economy today is inflation. And inflation that is caused by too much cash supply into the economy, inflation that is caused by the federal government having like a fiscal strategy paper that relies exclusively on debts as a means for funding budget deficits, and that has engineered the government to abuse Section 38 of the CBN Act. These are the most pertinent issues today on the front burner. And I believe that this issue of cashless policy and change of Naira, design of Naira notes is just misplaced priority, to be honest.
Okay, what would you also talk about the issue of this, especially these market women? Some of them they get to reject this new Naira notes. They don't even think is something that should be out there. They get to reject it. Do you think there is need for an awareness?
Yes, there's a need for awareness, but even in this awareness, you have to understand that it takes time for you to disseminate information through to the system. It's easier for the people in the urban and semi-urban areas to get it because they have access to smartphones, they have access to TV, but it's not as easy to get the information to sink in the rural areas. I mean, these are the kind of notes that they've been used to the last 20 years. And getting them to, get used to the new Naira notes will take time. And this is the reason why a 90-day window is short. You have like at least a 1-year window. You introduce the new Naira notes in phases and you allow the old Naira notes to stay and gradually phase it out of the system. But you saying that, for the central bank saying that this is a way to fight terrorist financing and election spending,
Mr. Kevin, I'm afraid we're almost out of time. All right. Thank you very much for your contribution. As always, Mr. Kelvin Emmanuel, CEO of Dairy Hills Limited. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Mr. Ibuko, can you say one or two things about this whole Naira thing? Just a few minutes. We are almost out of time.
Oh, well, we're waiting for it. I have not seen one.
Wow.
They say, when did they say you're supposed to?
31st.
We're waiting. We'll get it. But I don't know whether it's going to help this inflation that we're seeing all over the world. I don't know. But it's not a Nigerian thing alone. It's all over the world. Inflation is there. But whatever we can do to bring down this inflation will be okay. This is it.
All right, Mr. Joe Ibuko, thank you for coming on the show. We really appreciate your contributions so far.
Thank you.
All right, and thank you also for being part of the show. And that's it. Remember, you can follow the conversation on our social media platforms at TVC News NG or on our website at tvcnews.tv. I am Jacinta Agochukwu. Until next week, it's goodbye.